Hello, my friends. So, a lot of people like to debate race realism by bringing up points like IQ distributions and tendency toward crime and physical characteristics and things of that nature to prove that races exist. They use this information to try to prove that races exist. And I think, honestly, that is the wrong way to approach the topic. And I have an alternative way that I'd like to explain to you that I want to approach the topic. And that is the question of race as a possibility. The question of, are humans the type of species that can undergo a process of racialization where they are differentiated into distinct biological groups? And I think the obvious answer to that question is yes, humans are capable in just a hypothetical way of differentiating themselves into different distinct biological groups. And they do this by separating from other groups and maintaining reproductive isolation. This is something that I think Richard McCulloch talked about in a paper that I was recently reading called Racial Nihilism. And so I think if you present the question as a possibility, you ask the question, is it possible that humans can undergo the process of racialization? So if we define race as a group of people which is biologically distinct from other people, then obviously races can exist, and obviously historically this has been the tendency of humans, which is to create groups and then maintain reproductive isolation within those groups, so that over time, since they're only reproducing with themselves, they develop unique characteristics that the group shares, but that are distinct from other groups that developed elsewhere. And the question then, if we think about it like this, if we think about it as, is this process even possible? And the answer to that is obviously yes. And the answer to, history shows that this occurred, that there are situations where human beings grouped themselves off, separated themselves, and maintained reproductive isolation from the group surrounding them for thousands and thousands of years. This has been the majority of mankind's history has reflected this sort of process, and it could be conscious or unconscious. Examples of it being conscious are like the Yazidi that I know of in the Middle East, where these people have maintained genetic isolation and reproductive isolation from the groups around them by separating themselves and only reproducing with themselves. And so that has distinguished them as a race that is different from other Middle Eastern groups. So it could happen consciously. They consciously decide not to reproduce with outsiders. And that is how a race develops and becomes a reality. And it can also happen unconsciously, where you had like nomadic hunter-gatherers who crossed the land bridge between Asia and North America way back at the last ice age and became the Native Americans. They were at one time indistinct from East Asians, and over time, since they were isolated and they reproduced only with themselves, they became a different race. So races are a possibility. Our species can potentially undergo this process of racialization, as I said. And so people who are against the right of groups to separate from other groups and maintain reproductive isolation in order to preserve their race, people who are against that right are really, as Richard McCulloch said, racial nihilists. They deny the right of people to separate into their own groups and maintain biological, genetic, reproductive isolation. And to deny that, I think, is, I mean, you're not acknowledging or identifying some universal truth about the world. You're just denying people their right to separate and reproduce only with their own kind. So this isn't an issue of whether races exist or not. It's an issue of whether you're going to allow people to continue preserving their racial distinction from others. Because these racial distinctions obviously have occurred. So, yep, that's it's my way of thinking about it. So, thank you for watching.